Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. So, this is one of those so moments. Evidently, world leaders came together over the weekend. The big group of 20 summits, all the countries coming together, all the main economies to basically issue a watered down, real direction climate address that you just go, okay, we're going to get nothing done. That's what I'm getting. Nothing done. Few concrete commitments, if any. Not going to help reach any goals at this point. In fact, Greenpeace, I think, said it best. That said the G20 leaders failed to meet the moment ahead of the COP26 climate conference that is going on in Glasgow. No commitments, no G20 commitments, nothing to reach zero carbon emissions by 2050, none of that stuff, nothing. But you did have British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, leave it to Boris, who came up with the punchline, it's 1 minute to midnight, he said, and we need to act now. We have to move from talk and debate and discussion to concerted real-world action on coal, cars, cash, and trees. We need more trees, which is why in Biden's Build Back Better plan, you got the 300,000 climate folks that they want to bring in to do some of that stuff, building trees, do some Johnny Appleseed stuff. But this whole COP26, about 25,000 people going to participate in this big thing. Sadly, I fear nothing's going to come out of it. Now, Joe Biden tweeted out today, the science is clear. We have only a brief window to raise our ambition, to rise to meet the threat of climate change. We can do it if the world comes together with determination and ambition. That's what the COP26 is about, and that's the case I made today in Glasgow. And great, this is fabulous. I love the fact that Joe Biden's talking about climate change. But immediately my mind went to Joe Manchin. Nothing's getting done without unelected President Joe Manchin, who is basically Lucy in the Charlie Brown skit again. And we knew he was going to be Lucy. This is not a surprise. No one should be surprised. No one. Because on the very day that this is all going on, and understand, over the weekend, you had a number of progressives coming out and swallowing the hard pill. Turns out that hard pill to swallow was poison. We're gonna go along with this much watered down plan. So what does Manchin do today? Kind of gives them the shot there in the where. He says, quote, simply put, I will not support a bill that is this consequential without thoroughly understanding the impact that it will have on our national debt, our economy, and most importantly, our American people. He then went on to wag the finger. He went on to point at progressives and warn them that holding the bipartisan infrastructure bill hostage, not going to work on him, not going to work on Joe, because he's willing to let both of them tank. Understand that. And what's frustrating in this is Manchin shows us right where he's been, and he's been here all along. And I guess the argument is, well, so much for good faith, and this is why the progressives were leery to come along, and when they did, good shot in the back. He's been responsible for months of watering down the Build Back Better plan. Remember, it was $6 trillion to start. That was the big ambition. Nobody thought that was ever going to happen. But like any negotiation, you find some middle ground. So the middle ground would have been 3. That's what you do with Republicans to try and get them on board. Go, okay, well, what do you want? You do the horse trading. Joe Manchin got it down and said, maybe 1.5, maybe 1.7. So Biden came all the way down to meet him. Said, okay, this is what you've said. We've taken out all the things you want. We've stripped everything out of it that you didn't want. No free college, no negotiating prescription drug prices, no dental, no vision for granny, none of that. All gone. And now he comes out and says, no, not going to do it. and then the wagging of the finger. You progressives, don't do the bad thing. And my thought was, well, welcome to the circular firing squad. And this is why progressives were leery. They did. They swallowed the hard pill. I saw Ro Khanna this weekend come out and say, yeah, I'm going to support it. And like I said, that hard pill to swallow has turned out to be a poison pill. And understand, this is Biden's ACA. The difference is, as I said from the beginning, and I said this months ago, I don't think anything gets done. At least with the ACA, Obama got something. Now, granted, in the midterms, he got just beaten senseless with it, and Democrats ran away from it. This, I fear, Biden gets nothing on this end of it. And still going to get beat up for it. And this is where Democrats, you just go, what? Now, understand, Joe Manchin is today's, Joe Lieberman or Max Baucus, if you remember the ACA fights back in 10. That's who this is. And we knew this, didn't we? I mean, understand, we knew Manchin was going to do this because it's what he does. I actually thought, though, at some level there would be a point where he goes, now I'm going to get what I need to bring home to the people of West Virginia. If nothing gets done, the people of West Virginia are still one of the poorest states in the country. People will literally die. People will go hungry. Children will go hungry. Families will, continue to struggle as they have been. All because, he has his want and strategic pause. Now, look, I blame Joe Manchin. I blame Kirsten Sinema. But I also blame the 50 Republicans who have made Joe Manchin possible. If we had a functional democracy that actually listened to we the people, where the issues mattered instead of the letter behind your name, we wouldn't need Manchin and Sinema, because there would be other Republicans to go, you know what? I live in a poor state. Mitch McConnell, Kentucky. John Thune, South Dakota. I live in Joni Ernst, Iowa. I live in a poorer state. I've got people who need to put food on the table for kids. We've got seniors in our state that need glasses and chompers. Yes, we should be bringing some of this home. But, as I was going through the list of Republicans, the stale old white man club with a couple of women and one black guy scattered in for good measure, I'm looking at them going, well, who? The Republican Senate has gone so extreme to the far right that seriously, Jim Snowball Inhofe, you think he's going to do anything on climate change? Chuck Grassley, who, seriously? And the answer is no, none of these people are the savior. You would think, Susan Collins, who likes to pretend like she's a moderate, maybe Lisa Murkowski. No, on this, they're lockstep. And understand, this stuff is popular. Negotiating prescription drug prices, really popular. They're $250 a month for families with kids, so they can make sure that there's food on the table, or a little bit of extra income to keep them just a little bit ahead of the game. Really popular on both sides of the political aisle. Even though the Republicans do say, socialism, but they'll go out, cash the check anyway. Don't see many of them returning it. And I'm just going down this list and I'm going, how'd the Republican Party become the party of scorched earth? How'd they become the party of the wealthy? Because that's where their allegiance really lies. If Democrats said, hey, we're going to give tax cuts to rich people, we're going to give it to Elon Musk. so that when Elon, came out recently and said, I'll sell $6 billion of Tesla stock if I could end hunger, and the UN has a plan to end hunger with $6 billion. You're not going to do it with $6 billion, sorry. But, hey, you would think, even if we said we're going to give Elon Musk all the money, we're going to let Elon Musk end hunger, they'd still vote against it because it's benefiting those kids and those families and not Elon. It's crazy times we're in, which is why part of me goes, they're putting up with Joe Manchin's you-know-what, because one, Joe Manchin flips, and he's not going to, because he's in the most powerful position he's ever going to be in. He could become an independent tomorrow and still caucus with the Democrats and still be the outsider, the fly in the ointment, or, the turd in the punch bowl. Probably more apt. But the reason that they're really trying to play with kid gloves with him is that Chuck Schumer this week is going to move forward. They're teeing up the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which is going to help with our insane voting system. And what this part of it's going to do is going to go back, and it's going to undo what our corporate Supreme Court hath done in the Shelby case, and get rid of pre-clearance. It's going to go and it's going to re-put back into place all of the things in the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that the Supreme Court said, no, we're better than this now. We don't have those problems. No. Change whatever you want. And look what it's done. And they're hoping that, maybe, possibly, oh boy. Listen, you're not getting 10 Republicans to vote for this. It's going to die in cloture, and Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are going to do nothing to end the filibuster, even on this, even though they have signaled that maybe there might be some discussion. Not going to happen. This is going to die just like everything else that is put forth that would actually be helpful, because, again, Joe Manchin. Now, remember, the reason I say that the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is going to die is because, if you remember, at the beginning of the year, Congress put forth the For the People Act. And the House passed it. We were going to overhaul the entire voting system. And there was a lot of stuff in there, tons of stuff. They threw everything and the kitchen sink into it, with the idea that, as we debate, you'll pull things out and you'll hone the bill down. You'll streamline it. And that's what Joe Manchin did. He watered it down like he did with the Build Back Better plan. And what it became then is not the For the People Act, but the Freedom to Vote Act. And look, there was some good stuff in there. There really was. Some good stuff. And it passed. It passed the House back in May. Over the summer, the Senate killed it twice. Again, why I believe the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is a pipe dream. But here's the thing. Manchin's plan that he came out with, not bad. Expand early voting rights, do something on automatic voter registration, which we need. Make Election Day a holiday, which I've been calling for a very long time. If a polling place is changed, the state has to tell you 7 days before the election. So this would be a reason why to not keep changing polling places whenever. Make sure that those provisional ballots that people sometimes have to fill out actually get counted, even if they were cast in the wrong precinct. That you find the right one. And then some really good stuff on the other side. Doing something with dark money, tightening disclosure rules, tightening a ban on the coordination between campaigns and these PACs, these super PACs. Require Facebook and other social media platforms and high-tech platforms to disclose political advertising. Probably not a bad thing. We should know who these euphemistically sounding groups, Americans for Dogs and Puppies. We should know who's spewing this crap. All kinds of stuff. Mandate, money being handed off from foreign actors. I mean, think about what was his name, Fortenberry. It got a bunch of money from the Nigerian Lebanese billionaire. When I first heard it, didn't you think it was one of those stupid chain emails? Do you think he got sucked into a chain email? No, this is the guy. They found him. This guy got a check. And there's a bunch of other things, like making sure the president and vice president divest from their businesses so they're not profiting off of sitting in the White House. Seems sane, rational, all kinds of things. There was some good stuff in here. And Joe Manchin said, if you let me strip that For the People Act thing down to nothing, I'll get you 10 votes. Guess what? Didn't happen. No 10 votes. And guess what? Voting rights legislation is dead. And for me, the most important piece of legislation is the voting rights stuff. Look, I want the Build Back Better plan. I think it's something we desperately need as a nation. I think it's an investment that we've been putting off for far too long. But I'll go another year without it. If you give me the opportunity to have a fair fight, to go to the voters in November of 2022 and 2024 with a fair fight and run on the ideas of, hey, we need these investments. If you want to negotiate for prescription drug prices, if you want to expand Medicare for Granny to get chompers and glasses and hearing aids, if you want to make sure that no kid goes to bed hungry, if you want to make sure kids going off to college after high school get that free community college or voc tech training, you run on that. You vote for the people who want to bring it to you, not the people who have been sitting back going, no, we're not doing anything. We have no responsibility to govern. This is what the Republicans have been saying. The party of no has been saying this for a while. This isn't new. This is even when they were in power. They did nothing. Well, that's not true. They did hand a whole boatload of cash to our billionaires. They did hand off a boatload of cash to corporate America. Shareholder class, investor class, the Wall Street Journal folks, wow, fat and happy, flush with cash and tax breaks. To the point to where, as someone emailed me this week saying, look, you make $25,000 a year, you pay almost as much taxes as a billionaire does. It's crazy. It's insane. It has to change. Question is, will we do it? I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day workers at International Harvester went out on strike. At the time, it was the UAW's longest strike. 35,000 UAW members at 21 plants in 8 states downed their tools. For 172 days, Harvester workers walked the picket lines over seniority rights and forced overtime. They had long resisted mandatory overtime rules. Workers at Harvester were the only UAW members anywhere who still enjoyed the 8-hour day, 5-day work week. They had no intention of giving that up, especially in the industrial downturn of the period that threw over 100,000 auto workers out of their jobs. Harvester argued the company had lost $1.3 billion in recent years because of work rules. The company hoped to force a concessionary contract. But 6 weeks into the strike, the company announced a 98% increase in profits for the year. 3 months into the strike, Harvester hinted it would drop its demand for forced overtime in exchange for part-time hires that would be non-union. The company also hoped to do away with seniority rights in job bidding. Despite injunctions that limited picket lines, strikers were able to minimize scabbing and shipments in and out of many plants. At a plant just outside Chicago, strikers Striking Local 6 members marched outside company offices with a burning effigy of hated Harvester President Archie McCardle, chanting "No forced overtime." Victory finally came in April. Harvester workers stood tough for months against company attacks in a period of massive plant and mill closures across the country. They secured seniority rights in job bidding and beat back attacks against mandatory overtime. As for McCardle, brought in to slash and burn the union workforce, he was fired.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're in this spot where, all I keep hearing from people is, Rick, Joe Biden's approval ratings are in the tank. It's terrible. They're terrible. And they're fixated on this to a degree where you go, look, the reason that his approval ratings are down is because, well, guess what? This fight has been going on for all of this time. And look, it shouldn't be. This is something that, Joe Manchin, our modern day Joe Lieberman, this is the position that he's put us in. And ultimately, there's work that's got to be done. And here to share some thoughts on, well, should we pay attention to the approval ratings? Is this something that that needs to be worked on? Is this something that eventually we get past? Is this something we need to, I don't know, push forward on? I'm personally not a huge poll guy. I'm saying it would be great if we could possibly get what we need pushed through. And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So walk me through this. The approval rating is not great. It looks like we're not getting the Build Back Better plan. Should we be fixed on the approval ratings?
Well, I think this is a really challenging moment because there are people who are using these approval ratings as reason to not go forward on legislation, when really these approval ratings are a sign that we have not delivered on legislation that people really want.
Yep.
And the answer is not to stop work or to keep cutting Build Back Better. The answer is to pass the original package people wanted.
And, the thing that's infuriating to me is I've talked to so many voters recently who say, if I don't get this, or if this isn't in the legislation, if we can't do something on voting rights or on free college or debt forgiveness, I'm staying home next time. And I'm going, kind of the wrong message, kind of the wrong thing to do. But there's part of me that understands that in 2020, that's what they were told. We're going to get this done. You give us the majority. We get some of this stuff done.
Yeah, that's right. Joe Biden made some very big promises about what was coming. I think sort of overestimated in a way his ability to work the Senate on that thin a margin. But this is a bill that, at least as it stands tonight, there's a lot in this to be proud of. It's a historic bill by any measure, and any Democratic administration should be proud to have this stuff so close to being law.
Yeah, I mean, even if Lucy keeps pulling the ball away, there's still a lot in this. And look, I said this the other day. Look, do I want all of the other stuff too? Yeah. We can organize around getting that next time around. We get what we can now. We take the win. We put what we can into place. We make people's lives better, and you run on that.
You do. And there was a point, as a progressive, there was a point in this negotiation process where the Build Back Better bill was not enough, where it was not doing what was promised. But this is a package of legislation that any of these individual things alone, universal pre-K, climate change funding, would be historic. And together, they completely change the game.
Yeah. No, the first thing I thought when I saw Manchin's press conference, basically wagging his finger at progressives, telling them, well, you better pass the other thing, was, this is why progressives were afraid of, just trust us. We're negotiating in good faith. This, immediately, because I saw Ro Khanna over the weekend saying, yeah, we're gonna vote. I'm gonna vote for this. Basically swallowing the hard pill that we now find out is a poison pill.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head that there is very little trust anymore. And we saw tonight Joe Manchin saying very plainly that he is happy to vote against this $1.75 trillion Build Back Better plan, a plan that he largely negotiated to look like it currently does. But there doesn't seem to be any sense of who Joe Manchin is actually working for at this point.
Yeah. No, this reminds me of the ACA fight, where we let Max Baucus and Joe Lieberman and Republicans water down that bill to where we ended up getting not as much as we should have, and it wasn't as good as I wanted. And then you got the people who watered it down, not even voting for it. I mean, Chuck Grassley, a perfect example. Kept watering it down and was never, ever going to vote for it.
Yeah, and what baffles me so much is that this has been held for so long. This was something that Democrats knew would likely help Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, would help Democrats going into 2022. And the longer this is negotiated and cut down, the less positive effect we're going to see from it. And Joe Manchin doesn't have to worry about that in 2022. But you would think, from a party building standpoint, that the president would certainly be pushing harder to get as much as he could as quickly as possible.
Yeah. No, I look at this, and Joe Manchin says that he thinks that he's afraid it might be too much. And I'm going, you're in one of the poorest states in the country. I don't know that too much is too much when you're talking about one of the poorest states in the country, Max.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, 67% of Joe Manchin's constituents support this. Things like universal pre-K and providing health and dental coverage would change their lives. These are people who have made very clear in every forum we've allowed them to speak that they want these things passed. And the only thing that I can think to say is that there are two senators from West Virginia. I would like to see the media pressing Shelley Moore Capito as hard as they press Joe Manchin, because these Republicans are largely voting against things even their own voters have said they want.
Yeah, no, I've been saying this for a while. We're focusing on Manchin and Sinema, but there are 50 Republicans, and if we had a functional democracy, you wouldn't need Manchin and Sinema because there would be a handful of reasonable Republicans. But sadly, and I've gone down the list of the 50 Republican senators, there isn't any reason on that side. All of them are, their voting records have shown me that they are far right-wing and even more afraid of the even further right-wing primary challengers. They're never going to be any help.
And the fact that that is not a broader message from Democrats it sort of surprises me. I mean, we see Mitt Romney, and he's getting this sort of fawning coverage from the media about how funny he was in his Ted Lasso Halloween costume. And here's Mitt Romney at the bipartisan dog costume contest. But Mitt Romney opposes universal pre-K. There are 50,000 children in Utah who lack access to a good preschool. How does he defend that to his voters? Why is that not every question he's receiving?
Max, this is the guy who was beating up on the 47% of working people in this country who don't pay federal income tax because they don't earn enough money to pay federal taxes. He was using them as the punching bag in one of his fundraising dinners. Do you really think he gives a rat's behind about their children? He doesn't care about them or their children.
I don't think he cares. What I do think is that if more of his voters realize that he's actively standing in front of something that a majority of them want, that could completely change this dynamic. We've not in any way required these Republicans to play defense on this, and that is a shame because this is a broadly popular set of policies.
Boy, I wish we could have that conversation, but here's my problem. What I'm stuck with when I hear Republican voters talk, I hear dumb stuff like, let's go, Brandon. I'm going, what is it? Is it stupidity? Is it jingoism? Is it you just want to cause headache and havoc? Because it sounds to me like most Republicans that I see in public don't seem to care about your kids, my kids. They don't even really care about their own kids.
They don't, and they couldn't tell you what they cared about. Republican values tend to shift based on whatever's coming out of Mar-a-Lago at this rate. We've seen them sort of jump between made-up scandals about Hunter Biden and COVID conspiracy theories. and now, whatever is coming next. But what you won't see is them talking about these issues because they know they can't defend on that. And if Democrats force that discussion, we could find some surprising outcomes in 2022.
I hope so, because here's the thing, and this is what I've been saying. Our media culture has realized the Republicans, they're never going to vote for any of this stuff, and they've gotten a pass. I mean, really, can you look at any of the current U.S. senators who have an R behind their name and go, hey, here's one that would vote for children. Here's one that would vote for Granny to get some new chompers. Here's one who thinks that kids should have the ability to go to community college. Here's one that's going to actually do something to make people's lives better. Can you name one of the 50? Because I'm looking at it. I'm looking at Rick Scott, who I think should be in jail. I'm looking at Marco Rubio. Are you kidding me? I'm looking at Richard Burr, who's probably going to be going to jail. None of them.
Not one. And it's a real shame because the entire reason we've slow played this Build Back Better plan is to indulge this fantasy from Joe Manchin that there are 10 Republicans who are just waiting to support universal pre-K. It doesn't matter that they say they aren't. That's the reason for getting nothing done. And at least we're beginning to realize that this has always been just a smoke and mirrors game from him.
Yeah. Now, this week, Chuck Schumer says he's going to be rolling out the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. This is dead on arrival, but he's going to bring it out anyway. Or I shouldn't say that. Do you think that there's a snowball's chance in where of this ever passing?
I don't want to say no, but I'll tell you, I don't want to say no because I so deeply want this to pass. It's something that needs to pass. But realistically, you may have 3, maybe 4 Republicans who are willing to cross over and do this, but nothing near what you'd need. And they wouldn't do it for anything near like what that bill looks like right now.
Right.
And anything less is selling out voters we have sworn to protect.
Now, that's just the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is just to undo what our Supreme Court did. Now, the thing that Manchin had said he was going to get 10 Republicans to vote on, this Freedom to Vote Act, which I got to tell you has some good stuff in it. There's some things I really like. That didn't have a snowball's chance in passing. I don't see this happening either. So we're in this moment where do you continue to handle Manchin with kid gloves in the hopes that maybe we can carve out some filibuster stuff? Because I'll tell you, between you, me, and the 4 walls, the voting rights stuff to me is more important than the Build Back Better stuff.
Yeah, the voting rights is everything. Without voting rights secured, the next elections are just successive gains by Republicans who are able to increasingly rig maps in their favor. But I honestly don't see at this point what more you can push Joe Manchin on. He's proven completely unwilling to move. He's proven willing to flirt with leaving the party and becoming an independent. And one thing that we cannot have is a scenario where Mitch McConnell is somehow back as majority leader in the Senate. That would be the apocalyptic scenario.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a Republican. I've thrown it out a couple of times that, hey, you never know what McConnell has promised him. And McConnell is whining and dining and lining up donors for him as we speak. But I don't see Manchin going to the other side because then he's just the 51st. He is the 51st senator, and he's not the one that he is now.
Yeah, he's instantly the least popular Republican in America.
Yeah. Although, look at West Virginia. Couldn't hurt him there. And there's talk that he wants to run for governor and that all of this is about that, which is kind of weird to me because wouldn't you have a better chance of winning as governor on a platform of, hey, look at all the bacon I brought home?
Yeah, I think it's always a popular campaign platform to say I'm the reason your kids are getting an education. I'm the reason you can get your dental care and take care of your grandparents' health. That's a great platform to run on. It's mysterious to me. I don't pretend to know Joe Manchin's future political plans, but if he's doing that, there's certainly a calculus I don't understand.
No, he's got his own agenda, and it could be anything. I've had people say, "Oh, it's because he owns coal stock. His kids own a company. It's part of that." I go, I don't know. Maybe he's part of it, but there's something above this. So willing to just really tank the Biden presidency and the Democrats' chances in 2022. It better be something better than just a couple of bucks in coal stock. Just my thought. Last question I've got for you. kind of changing gears. Evidently, the New York Fire Department's got about 2,000 firefighter jobs open now, huh?
Yeah, suddenly there's a big opening, and I'll tell you, it's an absolute shame, and it tells you how far things have gone from the idea that public servants should serve and protect the public. These are men and women who are normally the first on the scene responding to a crisis and trying to help people. And it's a real disappointment for our city that they've chosen to walk out instead of acting to protect their friends and neighbors.
Yeah. Now, I'm seeing stories on both sides. I'm seeing, again, it depends on the source. That a whole bunch of people are at last minute going and getting vaccinated, that they're going, all right, fine, we want to keep our jobs, we'll get vaccinated. And then the other side is, oh no, they're closing all the fire departments, and there are thousands of people who are doing all this stuff. What are we led to believe, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Well, it depends on what your partisan slant is on your news. The reality is likely to be more muted. I think the relevant number is going to be what are those absentee numbers in a month, because that will give time for 2 doses and 2 weeks to have come in. And then anyone who's sort of lagging behind will be brought back into active service. So if we see, 70, 80% declines in a month, we'll know that this works. They had to be dragged a bit, but it worked. If it's still high in a month, I mean, that's a tough amount of resistance and something we haven't really thought about how to address.
Yeah, and time for us to start, getting some new fire people. I know a bunch of people who had dreams of being a fireman when they were kids.
It's a great job.
It is a great job, and one that a lot of people I know could never get. So there's some openings. If you ever want to be a fireman, there's openings. And look, in Pennsylvania, they got a lot of volunteer fire departments, people who are qualified and that they want to move to New York and become a fireman. There's a push forward. But isn't it sad that something like this is what's caused this kind of chaos, and that's simply protecting yourself and others, but more importantly yourself, has become this kind of political football?
It is sad, and I've dug through this data throughout this pandemic, and there were a sizable plurality of people that had very reasonable hesitation, resistance to the vaccine, which is the wrong word to use for them. But as they got educated, we saw that group decrease. People got vaccinated. Yeah. What you're seeing now is really identity politics. It's anti-vax as a political badge of identification. And I don't know how you engage or persuade that group.
Yeah, well, you made your choice. There's the door. Good luck. Max, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Keep up the great work over there at the Daily Beast. Make sure you check out Max Burns' stuff over at the Daily Beast, where he writes his column. Max, thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day that bringing in a scab driver to run an elevated train in Brooklyn, New York, ended in tragedy. Members of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers were out on strike against the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company. The company had fired several union members for wearing union pins. To keep the trains moving, the company hired replacements and put them to work with little preparation. Edward Luciano received far less than the 60 hours of training that operators typically received before he made his fateful run. The next day, the New York Times reported on the deadly results, writing, quote, "A Brighton Beach train of the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company made up 5 wooden cars of the oldest type in use, which was speeding with a rush hour crowd to make up lost time on its way from Park Row to Coney Island, jumped the track shortly before 7 o'clock last evening on a sharp curve approaching the tunnel at Malbone Street in Brooklyn, and plunged into a concrete partition between the north and southbound tracks. At least 93 people died. Some estimates were more than 100 killed.
The operator and several company officials were eventually put on trial for manslaughter. No one was found guilty. The company did, however, pay out damages to some of the families. Negotiations between the company and the union would continue until 1920. The union eventually won most of its demands. In the years after the crash, new safety measures were implemented for elevated trains to help guard against human error.
Oh, the workers on the SP line to strike sent out a call. But Casey Jones, the union scab, he wouldn't strike at all. His boilers, they was leaking.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's Tucker Carlson Day. Today is the day the Tucker Carlson propaganda reel drops on some Fox streaming network somewhere, and I can't wait to not see it because evidently, according to the Fox Tucker Carlson propaganda reel trailer, we're hunting white people. Not only are we hunting white people, we're dragging them off to Guantanamo Bay. We're waterboarding and torturing them. We're doing all kinds of stuff, bad stuff. All because January 6th was it was a false flag, while simultaneously being a walk in the park, a frat party, just another day, or the most patriotic day in American history, depending on which propaganda thing you're consuming. And I got to tell you, the rewriting of January 6th is really troubling to me, especially because, Democrats have been so slow, in my view, of prosecuting these criminals, members of Congress, the moneyed interests, and our judicial system has just simply sucked on this. Slap on the wrists at best, not even that. It's infuriating. And here to share some thoughts on, our January 6th problem. And as he points out, you don't need to be Perry Mason to find January 6th conspiracy, just the courage to pursue it. And do we have the courage? That's why I've asked Will Bunch to come talk with us. Will is a daily columnist over at the Philadelphia Daily News and Inquirer. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
So I love that line. You don't need to be Perry Mason to figure this stuff out.
It's funny in the column, actually, I pointed out not only do you not need to be Perry Mason, you don't even need to be Hamilton Berger, which is one of the great TV names of all time. Hamilton Berger was the DA who lost every case except one, famously, but lost every other case to Perry Mason in the entire history of the show. But you know what? Hamilton Berger could have made a conspiracy case against these guys.
Yeah, he was the Washington Generals of basketball.
Yeah, exactly. Washington Generals. I love it.
This is one of those things, though. By not pursuing this aggressively, as we should have on January 6th and 7th, and by having the kind of slap on the wrist, couple of months in jail, maybe some probation, a little fine, we're playing right into the rewrite, the propaganda being put forth by people like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, absolutely. And my big issue on this is, why are we not going after the bigger fish, And of course, obviously Donald Trump is the biggest fish, but put him aside for a second, what about Rudy Giuliani? What about John Eastman, this lawyer who worked with Giuliani and the rest of the team who wrote up this memo? What about Steve Bannon, who obviously has something to hide, which is why he's not testifying? What about Roger Stone, who clearly is a confidant of Donald Trump and who was pardoned by Trump just days before January 6th and was photographed multiple times in DC with leaders of the Proud Boys? What about Michael Flynn? I could go on and on. I could give you 15 high-level names, including some of these members of Congress who we know a little bit less about their January 6th activities, but we know enough that they should at least be investigated, right? And this whole debate about I think, what is it, 600 or 800 of the, what you might call the little fish of January 6th have been charged so far. And, you know, I'm not a big mass incarceration guy. So if somebody entered the Capitol and didn't fight and do physical violence, I'm okay with them getting 6 months or whatever. But they're not who I'm interested in. I mean, obviously anybody who assaulted the police officer should be charged and penalized the way that American society penalizes all the other people who, get convicted of assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, here's my problem with that, Will. We walk into a post office, we break into a post office, you're going away for 5 years without even a question. You break into the U.S. Capitol with the intent, and everybody there, stop the steal. They knew what they were walking in there for. They were there to stop the certification of the presidential election. To me, that is a much bigger crime than just walking into a post office. But if you and I walk into a post office unauthorized, we're going to jail for a long time.
Well, I mean, Rick, we're liberals, or progressives or whatever we are this week. But yeah, we're not conservatives, so it's a little different, right? No, I'm kidding, but yeah, I hear you, but I guess my point here is that this debate about how these 600 people are being punished. The real question for me is, what is the Justice Department doing? What is Merrick Garland doing? We don't know. I mean, for all we know, they'll surprise us in 3 months with this mega indictment that includes Trump and everybody. But I don't think we're really seeing the signs that there's an aggressive, high-level conspiracy investigation going on. When, many legal experts, the more they look at this, say there's clearly a case for a broader conspiracy. I think you heard an argument last week that fraud may have been committed by these people in their efforts to undo the election. This John Eastman. I mean, the thing is, every day we're getting a new report, and a lot of this is confirming stuff that's already out there. I mean,
exactly.
This whole Willard Hotel thing kind of drives me nuts in a way, because I mean, there were pictures of these activities at the Willard Hotel were online in January.
That day.
And people like these internet sleuths like Seth Abramson, who some people love him and some people don't love him or whatever. But I mean, he's pieced together who was at these meetings, and it's a who's who of everybody. They were in a war room. They were in a war room because they were launching a war. They were launching a war on democracy, and that's why they had a war room. And if we're not going to do anything about that,
No, I mean, you couple this with the actions of Trump, and you've got the audio recording of him, telling the Secretary of State in Georgia to basically go searching through the couch cushion and find me 12,000 votes so that I can get what I need to put the plan that we now have seen in writing by Attorney Eastman into practice, so that on January 6th they can have their military go in and overthrow this. There's a straight line here for me, because I don't know if you've seen the videos of the guys who are all dressed up in their military garb, hand on the shoulder, marching up and getting into formation. They didn't just, we want a better vantage point to look. They strategically placed themselves in positions to do exactly what they did. You don't just have a gallows in your trunk that just pops up out of nowhere. I'm sorry, that's not how this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, these Oath Keepers that you were referencing here, I was writing about them back in 2010. I did a book called The Backlash about the Tea Party movement, which was kind of the cousin of the Trump movement. And these people, I mean, they're blowhards on some level, but it reached the point where they decided they weren't going to be all talk, that they were going to do something. And you're absolutely right. It's pretty scary. And and I'm glad you mentioned the thing about Trump and the phone calls to Georgia, and he was doing the same thing here in Pennsylvania, right? And because again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal authority, but I know enough about conspiracy to know that you have to have, two or more discrete acts, right, to do something. So to me, I look at these phone calls to Raffensperger in Georgia and some of the other officials, this is election tampering. He's the president of the United States with tremendous political and governmental power, telling them to find votes, which is fraud basically, and it's definitely election tampering. So that's one discrete act, and then short of that, he's on the internet telling people to come. Trump is telling people to come to Washington on January 6th. That it's going to be wild. Steve Bannon is working with him on his podcast, telling people, that it's going to be, crazy and the whole
All hell's
going
gonna break loose.
All hell's going to break loose. That's the phrase I was looking for. But and it's a conspiracy, Rick. I mean, come on. I mean, that's all there is to it. And so,
and it's just not January 6th, Will. It's not just for that day. I look at this most recent poll put out by the researchers at the Public Religion Research Institute. They've come out and said that 39% of Republicans, of Trump voters, believe violence may be necessary. True American patriots may have to resort to violence to save American democracy. This is, and look, not just 39% of Republicans, 11% of Democrats, 17% of independents. The pot is boiling to this point to where there could be even more bloodshed in the street because of this insanity.
Yeah, I mean, to this movement, they're not seeing January 6th as the be all and end all. They're seeing January 6th as the kind of Munich beer hall putsch, kickoff, right? And now we're seeing. I mean, thank God we haven't seen an event like January 6th, but it feels like we're seeing the build up to something, I mean, my last couple of columns, you referenced the one about the January 6th conspiracy, but my next column was about exactly this, the increasing violence, embrace of violence on the far right.
Right, which brings me to the trial this week of that Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
You have a column on this, and I think it's important that people understand that all of this stuff plays together. It's all intertwined in the rewriting of history and events. And look, the right is looking at this Rittenhouse trial as, he's going to be the savior of the moment. He's going to be their icon, and you could see it already lining up into places.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you can't. I mean, even if he's found guilty, which, with this wacko judge running the case, I'm not really. That's going to be perhaps tough to pull off. But if Rittenhouse is found guilty, he's going to be a martyr, and if he's found not guilty by reason of self-defense, he's going to be even more of a hero to these people. I mean, I think the reactions are already locked in. But it's important. I mean, this isn't just a trial of a teenager. This is a trial on vigilantism, and if that's going to be allowed in the streets of America.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing, Will, and I'm sure you probably know them too. I know people who it's their fantasy. They are waiting for the next civil war. They've been, I know a guy who's been storing rice and guns all over the central region here in Pennsylvania because that day's coming. We're going to have to rise up. And they think that they're going to refight the battles of old, only this time going to get the right outcome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's always a mindset. You've always got that kind of Civil War mindset out there. And what's different from people who maybe thought that way 20 or 30 years ago is now you have people like Donald Trump or like other higher ups in the Republican Party who, instead of trying to tamp down this rhetoric, encourage it. I mean, the classic example that gets talked about a lot is the mid '60s with the John Birch Society, and for all their flaws, and they had many flaws, but William F. Buckley or even Barry Goldwater, who was I think a little bit less flawed, but flawed. They at least tamped down the most dangerous extreme elements on the far right. I'm not celebrating what they accomplished, but
right.
at least that was the momentum, and there's nothing like that now. I mean, nobody's, you've got the leaders of the party out here chanting "Let's go, Brandon," which means that's my next column, by the way.
It's not even the leaders. I was at a hockey game the other night, and you got nitwits running around screaming that, like they're in on something that nobody else understands. And you go,
well, their entire political movement is based on owning the libs, right? And it really stands for nothing else, as I'm pointing out in this column that I'm working on tonight. I'm writing right now, but I mean, you've got a situation where 0 Republicans on Capitol Hill will vote to do anything about climate change, which is threatening mankind. Zero Republicans on Capitol Hill think that America should join every other nation in offering paid family leave. 0 Republicans on Capitol Hill think that America should do something about the fact that we're one of the world's laggards on offering childcare to under 5 children in this country, or that we have this outrageous extortionary higher education system in this country. All they care about is grievance and resentment, and they love this chant because they can say, "See how triggered you are," and I guess it's kind of it's always damned if you do. You can ignore it and it just gets worse, or you can respond and then you're a snowflake, we're owning you. It's like their game.
Yeah, no, I responded. I responded. I said, "You're showing me your 60 IQ. Keep it up. You go, buddy. Yeah. Go, Brandon, and take you with him."
Yeah, but the problem, but as I mean, the problem is if you're playing their game, whether you win or lose, I mean, the game should be helping out the middle class in this country, and they're not playing that game at all. And
you're
by not. Yeah.
That is such an important point, because all of the stuff in this Build Back Better plan that should be going through, that is overwhelmingly popular, would help these people, especially, some of the ones that I see, saying these idiotic chants. It would actually help their lives get better. And yet, no, we got to own the libtards, even if it means my kids don't eat.
Yeah. Or, I can't go to work. I can't go back to work because I don't have childcare, or, my kid's going to fall behind, your kid's falling behind because he doesn't have pre-K. And then if he makes it through high school, he can't afford community college, let alone, 4-year college anyway. So, I mean, that's the America, and the thing is, the more people get locked out of opportunities because they don't have higher education or they don't have these things, the more resentful they get. It's a spin cycle, and it's tragic for the country.
No, you are absolutely right. It's just one of those things that makes you go, wow, where do you go from here? But Will, I appreciate you taking some time. Great work you do over there at the Philly Inquirer. I hope folks will take a look at the work. The January 6th conspiracy is hiding in plain sight, written by my good friend Will Bunch. Will, keep up the great work. Love having you on. Hope you'll come back again real soon.
Oh, anytime. I love coming on, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Seriously, make sure you check out Will's work over there at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1835. That was the day that workers in Philadelphia organized what was the first general strike in North America. Their call was for the 10-hour day. The Philadelphia strikers were influenced by earlier actions in Boston. Carpenters in Boston had gone on strike for the 10-hour day as early as 1825. The workers in Boston declared, "We have been too long subjected to the odious, cruel, unjust, and tyrannical system which compels the operative mechanic to exhaust his physical and mental powers. We have rights and duties to perform as American citizens and members of society, which forbid us to dispose of more than 10 hours for a day's work. It was Irish workers on the Schuylkill River coal wharfs who started the Philadelphia strike. Printers, carpenters, and city employees soon joined the cause. In all, 20,000 workers walked off the job and idled the city. The Germantown Telegraph fretted for the well-being of the workers, printing, "The brevity of only a 60-hour work week would be harmful to workers, that all the extra time would be applied to useless and unworthy purposes." After only 1 week, the city caved into the demands of the striking workers. Workers would henceforth work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with 1 hour off for lunch and 1 for dinner. The success of the general strike electrified the labor movement, and a wave of strikes swept the East Coast. By the following year, the 10-hour day was the standard for skilled workers. In 1840, President Martin Van Buren instituted the 10-hour day for federal employees. In our present day, with the increasing attempts to weaken the power of workers and their unions, we must remember our history and our past successes. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Ralph Waldo Emerson told about a guest who came to dinner and spent the entire evening prattling about his own integrity. The louder he talked of his honor, Emerson wrote, the faster we counted our spoons. Today, America has not 1 but 6 guests in our national home babbling about their integrity. They are the 6 extremist Republican judges who now control our Supreme Court, and it's a bit unsettling to hear them go on and on, almost frantically pleading with us to believe in their judicial impartiality. For example, the court's newest member, Amy Coney Barrett, suddenly blurted out at a public forum in September that, quote, "This court is not comprised of a bunch of partisan hacks." Whoa, better count our spoons. In fact, each of the 6 were installed on the court by right-wing Republicans specifically because they had proven to be devout partisan hacks. Interestingly, Barrett made her unprompted and strained assertion of judicial integrity at the McConnell Center, named for Mitch McConnell, the rabidly partisan GOP senator who pulled a fast one last year, rushing Barrett onto the bench on a party line vote just before the Republicans lost control of the Senate. Indeed, old Mitch himself introduced Barrett at the forum where she gave her "We are not partisan hacks" speech. He grinned proudly at the pure hackery of his partisan protege. This is Jim Hightower saying another hardcore partisan on the court, Sam Alito, whined in October that critics accused the court's GOP majority of being, quote, "a dangerous cabal that resorts to sneaky and improper methods to get its way." Well, golly, Sam, yes, we do think that. Because again and again, you partisans sneak up on the Constitution and we the people to twist the law to fit your political bias and personal whims. If you don't want to be considered political hacks, stop being political hacks. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as Striketober has concluded, I said, look, love the fact that a lot of people are out demanding better wages, hours, conditions, a better voice on the job, better, all of that stuff. And the number of strikes we saw, good. Hoping that that would go into November, and we'll still come up with, what is it, Strike November or Strike November or whatever. Had enough November, whatever. I'm now looking at, there's a potential strike going to happen up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the Scranton Federation of Teachers. There's talk that on November 3rd at 12:01, the pitch of the night, that the teachers there are going to go on strike, more than 800 teachers and paraprofessionals. And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Arthur Steinburg to come talk with us. Arthur's the president of AFT Pennsylvania. Arthur, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, anytime, Rick. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, we've seen the memes, we've seen the hashtags. This is Striketober. Looks like this could carry over into November and December, and this could actually maybe pick up a little steam.
Oh, I think so. And the situation in Scranton is particularly, use whatever word you want, heinous, appalling. It just is beyond belief.
And this is one of those moments where, at the end of the day, nobody wants this. No teacher. I've never met a teacher who's happy about going on strike. I've never met a worker who goes, yay, we're going to go on strike. It's great. I found people who go, I don't have a choice. This is the last arrow in the quiver. They've given us no option. This is the last resort.
Well, and Rick, this is particularly true here when you recognize that the educators in Scranton have not had a raise for 5 years. Their average starting salary is 470th out of 500 districts in the state of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
The district was placed in a recovery plan by the state in 2018. And what they have done is they have made draconian cuts to the educational program and have saved the money really on the backs of the educators. Every penny that they have tried to put into back into their coffers and to increase their balances have been at the expense of the educational program or the teachers. They cut a renowned pre-K program. They've increased class size. They want to stop paying for extra duties. And as I said, they haven't given the educators a raise in 5 years, where they are one of the lowest paid districts in the state.
This is crazy.
And they are the lowest except for one in their area.
This is crazy because all we keep hearing, Arthur, is that there's a teacher shortage all over the place, and we can't get teachers. The teachers aren't coming back. And I saw this meme the other day that made me go, here's probably why. This woman tweeted out that she's making more money as a bartender, working 15 hours less than she was making as a school teacher. And you go, what kind of a world do we live in when bartenders make more than the people who take care of our most precious resource, our children and the future of this country? It's bizarre to me.
Rick, it makes no sense, and it's particularly worse in Scranton. They have at least 40 teacher vacancies now, which means the class size has increased again, which obviously impacts the children's ability to achieve. Pennsylvania exports more of its teaching college graduates than stay, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. And the city of Scranton is paying the price. You can't have a vibrant city without a great public school system.
Yeah, you're not going to get people to move there. So whose fault is this? I mean, we love to blame people. Is this the fault of the school district? Is this the fault of the state legislature? Is this the governor's fault? Where's the blame in this, or is it everybody?
Okay. Well, the blame falls with, as far as I'm concerned, the Republican legislature won't adequately fund the schools. They have $7 billion sitting in a rainy day fund, and they could have put all of the money into the basic educational formula program, and they chose not to. And the school board and the chief recovery officer in Scranton is not utilizing the money properly. They've gotten $60 million from the feds in the past 3 years. It would be very easy to fund a justifiable, fair contract for the teachers. So I would lay the blame at the state legislature, at the feet of the state legislature, and the chief recovery officer and school board in Scranton.
Yeah, would you throw in Tom Corbett and the massive cuts from 2010? Would you throw that in there?
Oh,
as
that
well?
started it. I mean, that started us down this path. But again, the successors in his party had an opportunity to rectify that now. And Governor Wolf has started to put all of the new money each year through the basic to fair funding formula. However, that legislature has denied him the opportunity to put all of the money through it, which is why the fair funding lawsuit has to go forward and is being heard. So put a capital R next to it with Corbett, the current legislature, and then at least half of the blame also goes to the chief recovery officer in the school district in Scranton.
Now, I have a friend who lives up in that area, and he tells me that there are other schools like charter schools and cyber charter who have played into this. Is this playing into that scenario as well, or is that a minor?
Well, sure. No, it's not minor, because you know how horrible Pennsylvania's funding is in relation to charters, how it just robs money from the traditional public schools. And as this situation worsens in Scranton, they're poaching kids from Scranton, which means that more money goes to the charters and comes out of the pockets of the school district.
I mean, there's a moment where you go, at some point you've got to make smart investments. And, this has been going on in the Scranton School District for a while. As you pointed out, they've appointed this overseer. And generally what I find out, and help me if I'm wrong, whenever one of those overseers is put in place, the education comes second to the penny pinching. Is this what I'm seeing there?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, the research has shown, we've done quite a bit of it lately, particularly in Pennsylvania, state takeovers do not succeed. Their main goal is financial austerity. They've had enough of austerity and bare bones budgets in Scranton. And if they don't rectify it soon, they're going to do irreparable harm to the school district, to the kids, the staff, and the city itself.
I look at Philly and I look at Harrisburg, where they put things in place where we end up paying administrators a whole boatload of money that should have been spent in the classroom, and they still fail.
Well, and fail, I think, is I take umbrage usually at that word because that gets thrown back on the educators and the teachers. I think it's the administration, the state legislature has failed.
No, that's what I mean. The administrators are the ones that are failing. We're paying them a boatload of money.
Funding stream. Then we're on the same page there.
No, there's no daylight between us on this, because I'm a firm believer, and I want elected school boards. I want parents to have say in what's going on, and I want educators teaching kids at the front of the classroom and not bean counters. And sadly, what's happened every time you get people tinkering in there who are looking at the numbers more than they're looking at how our kids are doing, we get problems.
Well, and again, just back to Scranton, I mean, and everybody's focusing on, and rightfully so, that the educators there are having, it's a great struggle to keep their heads above water financially, but the devastating impact it has had on the educational program in Scranton can't be overstated.
It's sad, especially, when you're coming out of this pandemic, and, there's going to be a lot of remedial work, I believe, that needs to be done. Let me ask you about that, because, I do believe there's going to be some remedial work that needs to be done, and we should be budgeting for that. And yet we can't seem to keep the lights on. It seems we can't seem to pay just the basic bills. How are we going to go and do the work that needs to be done into the future as we continue to move back to what was considered normal in the past?
Well, I think this is a perfect example of that. You have to at least give them the basic necessities before you can deal with what everybody lost. And surprisingly, because of the really remarkable efforts of educators across the state, some of the kids have fared rather well. But in poorer districts like Scranton, which have less resources and which require more services to keep the kids up to par, unless you put in adequate basic educational programs, it's very difficult to deal with the deficiencies that occurred due to the pandemic.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Arthur Steinburg, president of AFT Pennsylvania. We're talking a little bit about what's going on in Scranton, a potential strike on November 3rd, also a teacher shortage. Now I'm looking at
Rick. Let me throw something in. Yeah, let me throw something in about Scranton, too, which to me is maybe the most unconscionable thing I've ever heard. In the middle of what is still a global pandemic, the Scranton School District sent notice to the Federation that should the strike occur on November 3rd, and by the way, they are still negotiating, their health care benefits will cease immediately as of 12:01 that morning. Remember, many of those educators have kids that are students in the school district of Scranton.
Well, this is what employers do, don't they? It's the number one thing they do to starve people back to work and make them desperate, which again is another...
Try it. I tell you, I haven't seen it too often in the public sector, and particularly in the school system.
Well, it looks like it's coming there, doesn't it? But here's my question. I'm watching all these school board meetings. I'm looking at the organizing that's going on of pushing this right-wing agenda, under the guise of don't let a good crisis go to waste. It seems like there are those who want to starve our schools and our teachers for this idea that, well, in order to save them, Arthur, we've got to destroy them first so that they can take them over and remake them in the whatever bizarre Texas kind of way that they're thinking about.
Yeah.
Are you as afraid as I am that this kind of billionaire money flowing into these fake grassroots groups?
Very much so, Rick. Rick, they're using different issues now, but it's the same playbook they've done for years. Starve the schools of resources, then claim they're failing and privatize them.
Is that part of this?
Absolutely. That has been a consistent theme since this privatization voucher charter school agenda came into vogue. They're just using these newer issues now to galvanize support.
Right, because now you've got these people basically losing their mind, apoplectic over their children having to wear masks. Oh, I won't be able to see my child's beautiful smile. Nonsense like that. And all the while being the useful dupes for the billionaires at the top who are funding these grassroots groups, who are these, well, euphemistically named grassroots groups, who have the ultimate intention of destroying public education. And it's one of those things where you go,
public education, yes, and making money off it for themselves.
And that's where I was going to go with this. I mean, there's a lot of education money being siphoned off into these for-profit industries.
Yeah, and no better example than the charter industry in Pennsylvania.
So what can we parents do? I mean, I see these videos of, basically just parents losing their mind over masks. And now I guess there's this representative from Texas who's identified 850 books that he thinks will, I don't know, bring discomfort to students or maybe give them ideas about sexuality or racism, that he wants every school in Texas to report to him if they're on the shelves and report any other bad books. I fear book burnings on the horizon. You look at this stuff, that's what they're organizing around. Not how do we make education better? How do we get more qualified and keep qualified teachers in the classroom? No, it's about nonsense.
And it's to really further their own agenda, period, beyond education, just their right-wing, intolerant programs. So when you ask what parents can do, that they need to vote in their school board elections. This is a low turnout election coming up, and those well-funded groups take advantage of this so that they can get their supporters in and enact policies that once you do surveying and polling on, you find out most of the public's not in agreement with. But if they control the local school board, then they have the opportunity to enact their programs.
Yeah, that's the frightening part of this. And all of this seems to be coming out of Texas, where evidently we're rewriting history books as we speak. And look, I fear
it's Texas, Rick. It's the Koch brothers. It's all over.
Yeah, I fear at some point my kids may learn that January 6th was the most patriotic day in American history.
That's right. People stood up for the downtrodden, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's
rewrite history.
No, and this is why voting is so important, and being active and engaged is so important, because the moneyed interest, they've got an agenda, and it's not the agenda that they keep throwing out in front of us. I go back to the old Jay Gould quote, I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half. It doesn't even seem like they have to pay much anymore. We seem to be doing it to ourselves.
Yeah. They're disguising what they're doing very well, and people are fooled.
Yeah, scary.
Not everybody, but they, the money is being used, unfortunately, very effectively.
Yeah, on the Scranton front, what can we do to help the teachers there in Scranton? I hope on November 3rd there isn't a strike. I hope that they come to they get a good contract, that there's no disruption. But I also understand that at some point there's a breaking point, and you have to do what you've got to do. But what can we do in the meantime?
Well, I think, very superficially for right now, they have started a social media campaign for people to stand and support the Scranton Federation of Teachers. They can post on Twitter and Facebook. There are enough up there that they could like or retweet those, and that will let the interest in Scranton know that there is outside support for them, and let the teachers know that they have people in their corner so that they can persevere and weather through this.
Yeah, I
and
understand.
again, hopefully we'll be able to come to a negotiated settlement with them. The parties are working hard the Scranton Federation of Teachers is working hard towards that, and as we speak. And hopefully I'll be able to come back onto your show and we can say, hey, we got a settlement that is fair for the educators in Scranton and for the for the students and their families as well.
I hope so. And I understand the hashtag that they're using is "We support our teachers." Hashtag "We support our teachers." Throw a note out, say you stand with the teachers in Scranton and teachers across the country, because ultimately, as I've been saying, these are the folks that we entrust the most precious resource we have in this country, and that's our children and the future. If we hand this over to right-wing ideologues hell-bent on rewriting history and teaching their version of, well, whatever, we got problems in the future.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rick.
Just is what it is. Arthur, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great work there at AFT Pennsylvania. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance. I will talk to you soon.
Arthur Steinburg, president of AFT Pennsylvania. Again, you make sure if you're tweeting out, hashtag "We support our teachers." Maybe throw in there why a teacher is important to you. Look, I've had some really great teachers over my lifetime that put me in a direction on a path that made me the person I am today. I gotta tell you, I respect teachers. Sadly, we have to put up with the garbage that we see. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day workers at International Harvester went out on strike. At the time, it was the UAW's longest strike. 35,000 UAW members at 21 plants in 8 states downed their tools. For 172 days, Harvester workers walked the picket lines over seniority rights and forced overtime. They had long resisted mandatory overtime rules. Workers at Harvester were the only UAW members anywhere who still enjoyed the 8-hour day, 5-day work week. They had no intention of giving that up, especially in the industrial downturn of the period that threw over 100,000 auto workers out of their jobs. Harvester argued the company had lost $1.3 billion in recent years because of work rules. The company hoped to force a concessionary contract. But 6 weeks into the strike, the company announced a 98% increase in profits for the year. 3 months into the strike, Harvester hinted it would drop its demand for forced overtime in exchange for part-time hires that would be non-union. The company also hoped to do away with seniority rights in job bidding. Despite injunctions that limited picket lines, strikers were able to minimize scabbing and shipments in and out of many plants. At a plant just outside Chicago, striking Local 6 members marched outside company offices with a burning effigy of hated Harvester president Archie McCardle, chanting "No forced overtime." Victory finally came in April. Harvester workers stood tough for months against company attacks in a period of massive plant and mill closures across the country. They secured seniority rights in job bidding and beat back attacks against mandatory overtime. As for McCardle, brought in to slash and burn the union workforce, he was fired.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, on the education front, there's so much, man. So much. And the organizing of beating up public education has been going on for years. You go back to Eli Broad and the Broad Foundation and how they can starve the beast and close public schools and charterize them and privatize them and profitize them. Because understand, these people don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. No. It's all about the money. It really is. It's about the money. And it's not just about the education part of it. It's about the buildings. It's about the maintenance. It's about, the curriculum, the tests. The tests that we have to give our kids every year, those high-stakes standardized tests, there's a profit motive to them. The fact that you can get those in there, we make money off of each one of those kids. I had someone tell me that, in the charter schools, they don't look at students, they look at them as $10,000 there, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Every little head that walks in the door is money. Now, some of them do okay. Most of them don't do any better or any worse. And some do much, much worse. Some are like criminal enterprises where people have been locked up and thrown in jail and should be. But you look at the cyber charter stuff, wow. And fortunately, if the pandemic did anything, seriously, if the pandemic did anything, it made us aware of how bad cyber charter education really is and how maybe it's not the future. And it made me feel a little better going, you know what? I don't think parents are going to put up with it. I don't see it as what is coming. Just throwing that out there. Some good news come out of the National Labor Relations Board. Who? The people who oversee the National Labor Relations Act, the enforcement arm of the act. What they came out with is, during the time of October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021, the National Labor Relations Board recovered over $56 million in back pay and fees. Compare that to the fiscal year prior, during the former guy's term, and it was only a little over $39 million. So a huge jump in the amount of restitution being paid to workers who have been illegally fired because employers have gotten bold. And I look at this and I'm going, this is why I voted for Joe Biden right here, to make organizing a little easier. Look, the part of me what I want the most for me in the Build Back Better plan is the help to get workers able to organize. Because here's what I believe, and I've been beat up for this in the past. You mean you don't want to give children an extra $250 a month? Yeah, I do. But you know what I would rather do? I would rather their parents make an extra $500 a month in their paycheck by having better wages. I would rather their parents have an extra $1,000 in their paycheck. I would rather their parents do better at work so that they don't have to ask government for a handout. I would rather have an environment where people get good, solid, stable, family-sustaining wage union jobs with good health care, good working conditions, and some bit of retirement security than a government handout. I've told you before, and I'll say it again, I'm against handout programs for the most part. I want jobs programs. I do believe in the therapeutic qualities of work. I do believe if you want to eat, you got to work. I do believe everybody wants to work. Just a matter of ensuring that there is enough employment for them. And what we know is the private sector is never going to create enough jobs. Either because they can't, or more likely they won't, because why would you want the competition that they're going through right now of having to deal with working people who are going, nope, not taking crappy jobs. You're going to have to pay more. I say we need to have government as the employer of last resort. To me, that's what should be in the Build Back Better plan. That would be a good start. But this is okay with me. I'm happy to see the NLRB doing its job, moving forward on its mission. And I think next year you're going to see more. And then what I'm hoping is we don't see hardly any. And you go, but what do you mean, Rick? Why wouldn't we see hardly any? Because maybe employers will stop illegally firing people. And maybe, because especially if we put those fines in place, $100,000 per violation or $50,000 per unfair labor violation and $100,000 for every time you fire a worker, which now the number they've put, 6,307 workers were put back to work. Do the math at $100,000 per. That is a nice chunk of change. And then put into place the fines that would go into paying the worker, not just the crummy setup that we've got now, to where if an employer like Amazon, for instance, because this just happened, fired two of their workers because they had the audacity to say that Amazon wasn't doing enough on the climate front, and they fired the both of them. Well, they brought them back eventually, promised to never fire them again, but then settled for them to go out the door. All they legally had to pay was their back pay, minus, and this is the part, minus whatever they earned in the interim. So from the day they got fired to the day they were supposedly brought back, whatever they earned in between is subtracted from whatever they were supposed to earn while being an employee. And you go, how many people can get by on zero income that would make that penalty real? Most people go back to work and they get somewhere near the same wage. I've actually known people who've done better and didn't go back at all. So there's no penalty, there's no disincentive. For me, having an NLRB that's going to actively and aggressively go after people who illegally fire, and then having a dog with big teeth to take a big chunk out of their behind when they do illegally fire someone, that's what I want to see. I want a deterrent. Cop on the beat, deterrent, so that they don't do it anymore. And that there is an even playing field, that there is a way for workers to then not be afraid and harassed and intimidated for standing up for their rights. So good on the NLRB. Very, very happy to see that. And look, this is another reason why we need the Build Back Better plan to make organizing just a touch easier. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We are still on track for climate catastrophe.
Mind the gap. A new UN report finds massive emissions gap between where we are and where we need to be. Plastic could become a bigger polluter than coal by 2030. Plus,
it'll give a boost to consumer confidence and acceptance of EVs.
Rental car giant bets big on electric vehicles.
I like big bets, and I cannot lie. All of those big bets and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Bomb cyclone, yes. Bomb cyclones, because that's what weather is now. Just a combination of terrible things. So get ready for next week's forecast of murder typhoon, stabacanes, and the rest of the week is floods that try to explain Bitcoin to you.
Oh, no. Oh, that's the worst. This is your Green News Report.
I don't care what blockchain is. Stop trying to explain blockchain.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the oil industry is grilling the rest of the world. Seems only fair that their own CEOs would get a grilling in Congress.
Yes, it does. As we go to air, House Democrats are grilling executives from ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, and Shell about investigations that exposed how the companies have known since at least the 1970s that their products could cause dangerous man-made climate change, and then spent millions to deny the science, mislead their shareholders and the public, and block legislation to address it.
Go get him, please.
Meanwhile, congressional Democrats are still hard at work trying to reach a budget deal that includes as much climate action as Coal State Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia will allow.
That's pretty much nothing.
Manchin's time-wasting maneuvers and demands to gut climate policies in the Build Back Better Act have seriously weakened President Biden's hand at the big UN climate conference in Glasgow, where the U.S. will be trying to convince other nations to cut their greenhouse gas emissions even faster.
I wish them luck.
And new polls show that 6 in 10 Americans of all political stripes believe that the pace of global warming is speeding up, and 55% want Congress to pass a bill to ensure that more of the nation's electricity comes from clean energy.
Yeah, well, if we did things because most Americans wanted them, we wouldn't be the United States of America.
In advance of the climate conference, Australia, a major coal exporter, announced a target of net zero emissions by 2050 with zero details on how it plans to get there.
Magic.
China, Saudi Arabia, and Russia also announced net zero targets for 2060. And it matters because the UN's new emissions gap report released this week finds that the world is dangerously off track between where nations are on emissions reductions and where we need to be.
We are really screwed.
In a press conference, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on all nations to strengthen their climate pledges.
We are on track for a catastrophic global temperature rise of around 2.7 degrees Celsius. Now, even if the announcements of the last few days will materialize, we would still be on track to clearly more than 2 degrees Celsius.
Totally fake accent.
Now, the report finds that current pledges would only reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 7% by 2030, but cuts of 30% by 2030 are the minimum necessary to avoid overshooting the Accord's 2-degree target. Scientists warn that more than 2 degrees Celsius of global heating would trigger profound global changes like deadly extreme heat waves, water shortages, global crop failures, and ecosystem collapse.
As opposed to what's going on right now.
In other news, a stark warning about plastic pollution. As the world moves away from fossil energy, the oil industry is trying to extend their profits by pushing to expand plastic manufacturing, which uses oil. A new report from nonprofit Beyond Plastics finds that if current trends hold, the plastic industry's greenhouse gas emissions are on track to outpace emissions from coal by 2030, effectively canceling out global efforts to slow climate change.
Have I mentioned within the last minute or so how screwed we are?
Finally, a bit of good news. Car rental giant Hertz announced this week that it will buy 100,000 electric vehicles from Tesla, accounting for more than 20% of Hertz global fleet, and that it will add thousands of EV charging stations to its rental locations. It's one of the largest purchases of battery-powered cars in history, and the latest sign of the car industry's shift to electric vehicles.
I like those signs. Very nice. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, good or bad, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, Google, or Amazon Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, looks like she's tested positive for the coronavirus. She's going to be working from home for the next 10 days during her quarantine. She said she's experiencing symptoms, but they're mild. Mild thanks to the vaccine. Evidently, she hadn't been in contact with the president. And this is one of those things. I had a bunch of people going, you see Joe Biden not wearing a mask around all those other leaders. And I'm going, if there anybody who's been tested more on this planet than those people, I don't know who they are. But those 20 leaders, you know that they're being tested constantly, and everyone around them is being tested. So I kind of think it's okay if they, especially since they're all vaccinated. Just a thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Maybe some news from Glasgow. Maybe something of it's a minute to midnight, according to Boris Johnson. I've asked my good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
So Jen Psaki's got it.
Yep. She had her booster shot, too. Of course, you don't know when she got the booster shot. It doesn't say, at least what I read. And, Rick, between what time she got her second shot, and then the virus and the booster. Or did she get the booster, then the virus? I don't know. But her symptoms are mild. But, it still can be transmitted, and we know that. So.
I'm waiting for somebody, Bob, to tell me, see, the vaccine gave it to her.
Well,
I'm waiting for it.
I hear that. I know. I mean, in fact, on Facebook, I haven't gotten my booster yet. I'm about to get it with my dad. He's 98. But when I got my first and second shot, I posted, of course, and said, do which is one, I got my shot. And then people said, you wait and see how that turns out.
Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah. I had a guy call me a sheep the other day for being vaccinated. I go, here's what I know. I know 90% of the people in our hospital system, because they just said it on the radio, who are hospitalized with COVID are people who are unvaccinated. I know that that 90% of them who are dying are unvaccinated. So you keep it up, buddy. Maybe you'll be one of those statistics too.
Well, there was a story about in Vermont. I do Vermont radio, and it was big. I think 80% vaccinated in the state, et cetera. Then there was a news story, and I sent it to the guy. I do a show, and we were talking about it. again, there's a surge in Vermont because it's a surge amongst the unvaccinated. So you have to read the article. Otherwise, it looks like 80% vaccinated and there's a surge. Well, it's because it's amongst the unvaccinated.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. That's how you thin the herd. There's a point at which you go, hey, we've told you everything you need to know. It's on you now. And better luck next time. And I hate thinking like that because I think it's bad for my karma, but I got to be done with it at this point.
Right.
Let's talk about crazy. Evidently, our U.S. Supreme
Court. Which one?
Which crazy? Evidently, our Supreme Court's going to take up the Texas abortion case.
Yes, they are. They are going to take up two of them actually, but yes, the Texas law, which virtually ended, abortion, and it was after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Then you got the tell on your neighbor provision in it, as they call it. But the justices started arguments today in two cases where the abortion providers or the Justice Department can mount federal court challenges to the law. Now, that's usually what they're saying. It's an unusual enforcement scheme. Then the defenders say, well, it'll shield it from federal court review. But it's really not so much the right to the abortion, but they're going to hear the specifics, and this is called legalese, but motivation for the lawsuits filed by the abortion providers and the Justice Department. And they're saying that the Texas law conflicts, of course, with the landmark Supreme Court Roe versus Wade. And that's going to be what they're going to zoom in on first. And then, of course, the Mississippi case.
So is it possible that they leave the 6 week thing in there and they take out the enforcement, the dog, the bounty hunter part of it, and we end up with a situation where now the Supreme Court has ruled that it's not 20 weeks anymore, it's 16, it's 6?
That's possible. And because they have stated that they are going to look at the jurisdiction aspect of it, which brings in Justice Department, or the state. So it's very possible. I don't know. They're hard to predict, but you never know. That could be part of it.
Boris Johnson at the COP20 climate talk said, it's 1 minute to midnight and we need to act now. He says we have to move from talk and debate and discussion to concerted real-world action on coal, cars, cash, and trees. That's Boris Johnson saying that.
Right, who is right, of course, right to the right in the sense of political, but
correct.
The whole thing was, first of all, China and Russia didn't have their leaders there, which says a lot. And the second thing is that Johnson makes, I think, a valid point. Time is running out. But overall, though, if you look at so far, of what they've done in Glasgow, I would say, what have they done in Glasgow? I'll put a different reference out there that way grammatically. What have they done?
Nothing.
Nothing. He's right on the alarm button, but I didn't see anything that led towards, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the treaty. This is how we implement it. This is the timetable. This is what the countries do. And again, Russia and China didn't even bother to show up with their leaders.
And we did nothing at the G20 either. I mean, they didn't come out with any real final communique that's going to move us to zero carbon emissions by 2050. There was really nothing that came out of that. So going from Italy to Scotland, just a bunch of nothing. And look, you look at the U.S. How can we take a position of leadership when we can't simply do the simple things that are in this Build Back Better plan to address climate change that I think most people like me would agree aren't going to do a whole lot?
Well, I think the precarious problem for President Biden, now on a positive side of the G20, he reversed some of the attitude that Trump had, all right, amongst our allies. That was refreshing for them, frankly. And he has reversed some of the policies, tariffs specific to Europe, which has never really been a problem. The tariffs in China he's kept, so that's a good thing. So he's on the global stage. He's done some of the reversals of what was causing heartburn with our colleagues overseas. But on the other hand, you're 100% right. On basically what's not done back in the United States, and it of course puts him in a precarious situation that he's over there. He's saying we need to have leadership, this and that, and back in the United States, amongst his own party, because he's not getting any Republican votes, but amongst his own party, he couldn't get a consensus because of their internal fights, as I always call it, the circular firing squad. Either party does it. So, yeah, it's a problem for him. It's not the best position to be in when you go over and you're a new president and you can't get the initiatives that everybody's talked about.
Yep.
And one of them is an initiative in America to help the society, and so he's overseas talking about helping the world society. It was a tough time for him.
And I thought that Joe Manchin's timing to have his press conference right while the president's in the middle of all this was kind of a good jab in the back, which leads me again to the position where I started from months ago, and we've talked about this. I fear we get nothing out of any of this other than the kind of rancor and kind of division and kind of circular firing squad that I had feared.
Well, I was. It was funny. I was over today getting a battery for my car key fob. And as I went over to get the battery, I saw Manchin on television, and so I ran over, obviously right away, and caught it. And I was watching the faces of some people that were sitting in the lobby watching it, and people were just kind of stunned. And I think in particular because Manchin, who said, "I'll do 1.5 trillion," then said, "Oh, okay, 1.7 trillion," because he did confirm that.
Yep.
And President Biden took it in that direction, in good faith, of course. And then I stood there today watching him basically say that he wouldn't accept 1.7 trillion for another reason, that it's the budget buster, it's this, it's that. Why would you? And, well, it's also a scheme. The funding is a scheme. And I thought there's got to be an intention, behind this to do it. And I think, I'm not going to call it a rare press conference, but I would call it it would be kind of unique at this point in time to do that press conference, because there's been back and forth press inquiries on this whole issue, as you and I know. You've been covering it for months. We both have. But all of a sudden, this was about him not bowing to party pressure to support more progressive social spending.
Yeah.
And he called it shell games and budget gimmicks. So that's sort of not like, I'm having a problem. That is, I'm sinking the boat.
Yeah, you sunk my battleship, absolutely. And what's worse about it is you had a couple of progressives, and I look at Ro Khanna, the representative from California, who then came out this weekend and said, yeah, I'm going to support this because we need it. Basically kind of, swallowing the hard pill that is what now turned into a poison pill.
Well, right, because the whole premise was, and I know some people went in different directions, the centrists versus the progressives versus the centrists. I understand that. But the whole position was one bill was going to move, and then it stopped, and then two bills were going to move. And then they went from 3.5 trillion to 1.7 trillion to move that piece of legislation. Let's say almost simultaneously. Not the same vote, two separate votes in the same period of time, right?
Right.
That was the whole game plan that yesterday, if I was doing your show, I think we both would have said, yes, that's, going to have some bumps and some hurdles, but that's what's going to happen. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen, because the whole thing has shifted to where it looks like there won't be a 1.7 trillion.
Yeah, and this is where, I look at Progressive Caucus President head Jayapal. Who everyone was saying, you just got to negotiate in good faith. This is where I go to her. She evidently knows there's no good faith there, because this was a break in that good faith. This was basically saying, I'm going to vote for and not only did he say he wasn't going to vote for the Build Back Better plan, but wagged his finger and basically said that you progressives have got to move forward, and I'm not going to be pushed into voting for anything else, and you got to vote for the bipartisan bill. Which was, kind of just if it wasn't bad enough that you came out against one, to kind of throw that shot in there was kind of another.
Right. There's also some internal politics here, because Senator Coons, a Democratic senator from Delaware, his quote was basically, there's quite a few of us are going to continue to press our friend and colleague. You know how you stand on the floor of the House and,
sure.
My good friend from Massachusetts, and then you attack them.
Right.
But when Coons said this and some other comments, there's another problem here. There's other fish to fry in that Senate. There's other fish to fry in that Senate.
The entire Republican Party.
Right. But now they're sitting back and letting the other people, the other side, be on fire. But I'm also, yes, you're right. That's something they have to deal with. But also they have bills coming up, and they have I call it the John Lewis bill. But they have the voting rights bill and some other things coming up. So I think some of those comments that Senator Coons and others make are not because they're afraid of Manchin as much as they want to watch, because there are going to be some other votes, and they're trying to make sure he just doesn't totally run off, I think.
Yeah, but I've been saying for a while now, if we had a functional democracy, Manchin and Sinema wouldn't matter. You would have enough Republicans who go, you know what? We've got seniors in my state that need vision and dental and hearing care. We've got kids going off to college that could really benefit from free community college. We've got children who could use that the pre-K stuff. We got families who could use that $250 to make sure that kids could eat. There was so much in there that could help constituents in their state that they're just going, nope, none of it. We'll have none of it. And that's crazy. That's not only crazy to me, but it's dangerous that one party has gotten a pass for it. This is the part that bothers me, Bob. Nobody is going up to these Republicans. Nobody's going up to Mike Crapo or Kevin Kramer or Ted Cruz and going, hey, why are you against kids getting $250? Why are you against Granny getting chompers? None of that.
Well, rethinking this, woulda, coulda, shoulda, there might have been a better way to build a mousetrap with the Republicans. There might have been. And that would have been to have prescription drugs lowered, and also the Medicare portions and a couple of other things, and you take it in a piece of legislation, you get it to the floor, then you do the amendment process on a lot of other items. Once you get past the 60 threshold, then you do the amendment process on college education, et cetera, et cetera. They might have gotten a few votes on that, okay? But the Republicans are able to sit back and say, $3.5 trillion, oh my goodness. And now, of course, what they'll say is, well, you're complaining about me? Well, look, it's a Democrat here, a couple of Democrats that don't want this. So the Republicans, for now, have maneuvered themselves into the jackpot seat because they're sitting back, and letting this all transpire, offering nothing. But when did they offer something on the Health Care Act? ACA.
No, all they want to do is take it away. They just want to kill it. There was no replacement. There was repeal. There was no replacement. I'm still waiting for the replacement.
Right. So they offer nothing. In this case, they're offering nothing, but they're kind of getting a pass because this is all internal. I think the only thing that saves this, the only potential thing that saves this, is going to be the ability of President Biden to, do something with Manchin.
Yeah,
that's probably. I don't see Schumer being able to do anything.
He'll just put his glasses down to the tip of his nose and wag his finger.
I don't see any. In fact, Schumer's been. When did you last hear his name?
Today, he's going to move on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act,
and that's why they're. You just made the point. That's why they're a little bit iffy on Manchin now of hitting him too hard from the Senate side.
But that's not going to pass either because Manchin's bill didn't pass. If you remember, Manchin had a plan that he said was going to get 60 votes. They rewrote the For the People Act for Manchin. And look, there's some good things in Manchin's version that I'm not against, but they completely chucked the For the People Act, and now we've got the Freedom to Vote Act, which passed the House in May and then got filibustered twice in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. So the John Lewis Act ain't going anywhere either.
Well, they keep thinking it is. They keep trying to woo Manchin on it. So I don't know. This one, I honestly, I didn't see this one coming, that it would get to where it has gotten to today. And what I mean by that, Rick, is I thought there'd be some back and forth, but at some point in time, I didn't think that Manchin would upend today the entire, and that's what he did, the entire Biden agenda for this year.
Yeah, see, as we're from the beginning, I was in the they're going to screw this up, that we're going to get nothing, and I've been saying this. I hope I'm wrong, and I still hope I'm wrong, Bob. But this is it. And look, this is going to be Biden's ACA. He's not going to get all the things that he needs or anything, and going to take a beating for it in the midterms.
Well, what's sad about it when you say it's Biden's ACA, at least President Obama got the ACA. Yeah. Now, I will admit, some of the Democrats handled it wrong. They took the bait from the Republicans and started to say, well, maybe we need to do this or that. They should have just defended what they did.
Lieberman, Max Baucus, yep.
Yeah, right. But it's an interesting point because yes, Obama took a lot of heat for it. Now they may have a bill. Think about this that they don't get, but they still take the heat for it.
No,
which is worse.
That's a fear. Going to be interesting again to see how this continues down the road, and I still am hopeful that something comes of it, but I'm not optimistic.
I'm not optimistic. I was a week or so ago. I really was, but now I'm just not sure.
There you go, Bob. As always, I appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst Bob Ney. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day that bringing in a scab driver to run an elevated train in Brooklyn, New York, ended in tragedy. Members of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers were out on strike against the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company. The company had fired several union members for wearing union pins. To keep the trains moving, the company hired replacements and put them to work with little preparation. Edward Luciano received far less than the 60 hours of training that operators typically received before he made his fateful run. The next day, the New York Times reported on the deadly results, writing, quote, "A Brighton Beach train of the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company made up 5 wooden cars of the oldest type in use, which was speeding with a rush hour crowd to make up lost time on its way from Park Row to Coney Island, jumped the track shortly before 7 o'clock last evening on a sharp curve approaching the tunnel at Malbone Street in Brooklyn, and plunged into a concrete partition between the north and southbound tracks. At least 93 people died. Some estimates were more than 100 killed. The operator and several company officials were eventually put on trial for manslaughter. No one was found guilty. The company did, however, pay out damages to some of the families. Negotiations between the company and the union would continue until 1920. The union eventually won most of its demands. In the years after the crash, new safety measures were implemented for elevated trains to help guard against human error.
Oh, the workers on the SP line to strike sent out a call. But Casey Jones, the union scabby, wouldn't strike at all. His boilers, they was leaking.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, one of the great regrets I have in doing this show over the years, and all 16 years that we've been doing this, one of the great regrets that I have was not getting Utah Phillips to come do our concert series here when we were back, a number of years ago when we were doing labor concerts and doing a lot of organizing and bringing people together. We had a chance, and I just didn't have the money at the time. And he passed away 2 years afterward. And it's one of those things. A great messenger. And I love his music. And you heard that in the last Labor History in 2. Again, one of those things you go, man, I should have done it when I was going to do it. But like they say, 2020 is history. How's that go? 2020 hindsight is 2020. That's where we are. Interesting bit of statistic coming out. Researchers at the Public Religion Research Institute They found that this is the weird thing. 30% of Republicans agree with the statement. Because things have gotten so off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. And they weren't the only ones. You had 11% of Democrats, 17% of independents. I would throw most of those independents into the Republican side of things because they're the libertarian folk mostly. I would have expected that number to be a little bit higher. Overall, 18% of all Americans agree that we may have to start slugging each other in the streets. Wow. Among people who believe the 2020 election was stolen, 39% of them believe that violence may be required. And this is kind of a scary thing because I got into one of these moments where somebody was throwing it out there and, hey, Brandon, and I responded, and it almost came to fisticuffs. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith